In today's farm report, it could soon be easier for beginning farmers and disadvantaged farmers growing non program crops to have crop insurance coverage. Ron Bain reports on NAP.
Oh boy, a nap about now sure sounds like a great idea. That is, unless if you are a beginning or underserved farmer or rancher, one that grows non-program crops like fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, other forms of horticulture, or some types of livestock. In that case, you need to wake up and learn about this kind of NAP.
It's the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. We call it NAP, and that's just sort of shorthand for low-cost crop insurance for crops that typically don't enjoy commercial crop insurance.
USDA Farm Service Agency Administrator Val Docini says NAP provides a basic level of risk management coverage for crops you are growing.
You could be supplying fruits or vegetables to a local farmer's market or a community-supported agriculture operation or perhaps the restaurant down the road, but you really should be growing it with some measure of risk protection, and NAP is a good tool for that.
However, thanks to the 2014 Farm Bill, the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program has been modified to give greater support to beginning and underserved ag producers. As Deputy Agriculture Secretary Krista Harden explains,
beginning farmers, underserved producers, and limited resource producers can now receive basic NAP for free. The service fee is waived. They pay only 50% of the premium for buy-up coverage. And further changes have been made to allow producers to work with our state FSA offices to establish prices for value-added productions such as organic, direct market, and fresh, so they can receive a premium for their crops based on the market they sell to, so they can insure the crops at market value.
Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says the changes to NAP are one more way to encourage potential farmers and ranchers to enter agriculture and provide support and encouragement to those producers just starting out or who are underserved.
Designed to give them a little extra flexibility and a little extra protection in those early years when they're just getting started. The Farm Bill and our effort at USDA is really focused on trying to make sure that the next generation of farmers have an easier time getting into the business and staying in the business.
FSA Administrator Val Docini says if you wish to learn more about NAP and eligibility requirements,
they should certainly call their local county FSA office to learn about NAP as it applies to their given county, whether they're in California or Maine or Florida. And they can also look to our website at fsa.usda.gov to get additional online information about NAP.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
One thing to take home from the early crop progress report figures is some severely delayed planting from the western Gulf Coast region to the Mississippi Delta. USDA meteorologist Brett Rippey says the numbers definitely bear that out.
Just in the last week, the week ending March 22nd, we saw our first few acres of corn and rice planted in Louisiana, but the overall numbers are far behind five-year averages.
For example, for corn and rice planting in Louisiana,
just 1% of the crop planted by March 22nd, the five-year average 48%. And for rice planting in Louisiana, just 4% planted by March 22nd, five-year average 23%.
Rippey says it really doesn't matter what commodity.
For example, in Mississippi, we still have not yet planted any corn, five-year average 17%. Even into Arkansas, none planted yet. 11% is the five-year average.
It's been a slow start to field work from the Gulf Coast to Ohio Valley and too cold to start in the upper Midwest area. For USDA Radio, Susan Carter, Washington, D.C.
The last day to select either the ARC or PLC programs with the USDA's Farm Service Agency is Tuesday, and as the USDA's Rod Bain reports, producers should not take the decision lightly.
ARC or PLC. Eligible growers have until the end of March to elect either the Agricultural Risk Coverage or Price Loss Coverage programs, the new Farm Bill farm programs. It was late last month that USDA officials encouraged producers to make their election as soon as possible to avoid a last-minute rush at local Farm Service Agency offices. But as FSA Administrator Val Docini notes, with significant numbers making their election and related updates,
that crush of business that we anticipated at the end of the month will be lessened somewhat. But frankly, there will still be, I think, plenty of folks that come in the very final days of March to do this business.
Now, media reports in recent days have offered polls and forecasts on how many farmers have selected what program. Docini says while there is not expected to be an official count until after the election deadline, there will be varying factors that will help shape a producer's decision on either ARC or PLC.
To a certain degree, it will depend on what part of the country you're in and what neighbors might be doing and what your local crop insurance agent has to recommend or other professionals that you rely on. We're seeing a mix around the nation. In some parts of the world, it's PLC. In other parts, it's ARC County. Hasn't been as much ARC IC, but that's perfectly fine too. These are individual and voluntary choices.
It's not just the farm program election that producers must take care of by March 31st. There is also the deadline to reallocate base acres and update yields, which growers will use to determine their program election. The administrator says most producers have done this. However, for those that have not, there's still time to do so.
For producers that spend a little time at the front end of the process by maybe looking at the web-based decision tools or studying a fact sheet or attending a public meeting, they come in knowing a little bit more about the decisions and the impact of those decisions. And so it's not a process that should take more than an hour or so.
And that's important because producers, by doing this, then setting up an appointment with their local FSA office prior to the deadline, can make their election in just minutes instead of waiting in line at the local office. Dulcini also reminds producers who do not come into local FSA offices by March 31st to elect either ARC or PLC.
You'll default to the PLC program and you'll lose 2014 program benefits.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. Say you're getting ready for a workout at the gym or playing hoops on a hot day, but perhaps somewhat prior, maybe even a little after that workout, reach for that drink that replenishes nutrients and minerals in the body. You say sports drinks? Water? Julie Garden Robinson of North Dakota State University Extension says,
milk, or chocolate milk in particular, is now considered one of the up-and-coming sports drinks.
Garden Robinson says this is based on recent studies about milk as a recovery and rehydration drink after workout.
Several research studies have been done, especially on chocolate milk. And chocolate milk seems to have the right blend of carbohydrates as well as minerals to help rehydrate the body. So that has become the new sports drink.
Also, milk contributes to muscle growth as it contains protein as well as minerals conducive to workout activities such as potassium. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Easter is just over a week away, and some Easter traditions are well explained, but others, like the idea of painting eggs and then hiding them, come very odd. Gary Crawford with the U.S. Department of Agriculture has more.
And now, our special Easter guest, Elmer Fudd.
I'm waiting for the Easter Wabbit. So fluffy and cute with his little basket of Easter eggs.
Yes, isn't that cute? But you've got to wonder, why eggs at Easter anyway? Agriculture Department historical expert Ann Eflin says since Easter got its start actually centuries before Christianity as a celebration of spring and new life and fertility, it's only natural that eggs, also a symbol of that, should come into things very early on. For example,
the Persians and Egyptians actually exchanged eggs that were decorated in spring colors as a way of celebrating the spring. The early Christians sort of adopted that.
And here is a story that Anne ran across, an obscure story that may play into this, and here's how it goes.
Simon of Cyrene, who helped carry the cross with Jesus, was an egg merchant, and when he returned home after the event, all of his hen's eggs had turned colors into rainbow colors.
Which would also help to explain why we decorate eggs. And connected with eggs, very closely, of course,
Here comes Peter Cottontail.
Yes, we have the Easter Bunny coming into this, an ancient German tradition.
The German story is that there was a poor woman who had decorated eggs for her family to find during a famine, and that I think they were to sort of identify which were their eggs, and they had to search for them and find them. And when they found them in the nest, they found this nest of eggs and looked up. They saw a rabbit hopping away, and that's how they decided the rabbit had brought the eggs.
This evolved into a tradition in which kids would hide their hats and bonnets around the house, and supposedly a bunny would leave eggs in them. Today, of course, we use Easter baskets. The origin of that, though, not quite clear. Ann Eflin says,
there's one reference to the tradition of Easter baskets coming from a tradition in the Catholic Church of taking the Easter dinner to Mass with you in a basket to be blessed.
But as the years have worn on, some of these Easter traditions have, of course, been commercialized. And so we've gone from real eggs and baskets to candy eggs and jelly beans and chocolate rabbits.
The transition from eggs to candy seems to have been the result of an advertising campaign near the end of the 1800s by a European candy company as a means of selling their candy Easter eggs. So they encouraged people to buy candy representations of eggs, and then of course it goes into all sorts of candy, and now we give candy and gifts and all sorts of other stuff.
And of course we have one other tradition.
In your Easter bonnet, with all the frills upon it, you'll be the grandest lady in the Easter parade.
That would, I assume, be something that grew out of this tradition of buying and wearing new clothes on Easter Sunday, which apparently came about at about the same time as that transition to candy.
So those are the origins of some of our special traditions of the season. In Washington, Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. As we approach the deadline for farmers to sign up for the various new risk management programs, we often hear those programs associated with the USDA's Farm Service Agency, but how well those programs operate over time may be tied partially to other USDA agencies. For example, the National Ag Statistics Service, or NASS as it's called. Lance Honig runs the crops branch of that agency, and he says for the programs to work properly,
these new programs require information. And the information that NASS provides is going to be critical to making those programs function the way they're designed to function. So it certainly puts a lot more emphasis on the data that we collect, and the more accurate data is going to come from more accurate reporting. So the best thing a producer can do to make that program work the way it's designed is to report the information.
Of course, the programs are also tied to prices, many of which are tracked and reported by USDA's Ag Marketing Service. So the long-term operation of these new farm programs depends on several USDA agencies and the producers themselves. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.